All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We're at 7 o'clock. We'll call our meeting to order. The first thing is adopt the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions in the agenda? If not, we'll need a mover and a seconder for motion 0112 to adopt the agenda.
Agenda be adopted as presented.
And I'll second it.
Okay. Questions? On the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against, nay? Motion carried. Okay. Anyone with a conflict of interest in the agenda? If not, we'll move on to council. I'll start. I just wanted to let council know that the policing study that the province has done has been completed. The documents, the report itself is in translation now, and we should have it, they were expecting by this week. Landon and I were on a conference call last Tuesday, and we've got another one set up for a week from tomorrow, and they would have expected by that time that we'd all have the report and have time enough to go through and read it. So as soon as we get it, we'll get it out to all the council, so we know where we're going. I think what they're looking at here is the proposal that was submitted through the Regional Service Commission for regional policing, because that's a newer report. It's ready to roll, and so we'll get that report and make sure all the council gets it, so we're prepared to go and do whatever we have to do when that comes up.
Mr. Mayor, just if I could, just remind me again, who did the actual study? Oh,
For the Regional Service Commission?
Yep.
That was Catalyst, Andrew Amos,
oh yes, okay, yeah. All right,
Catalyst
thank you.
Consulting, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, if not, we'll move on. Hopefully something good will come out of this. Councillor Arsenault.
Okay, just before I start, I'll let the folks at home know if I seem like I'm rushing it. Councillor Culligan's charger is melting, so we've been asked to speed it up a little bit, so I'm going to try and accommodate as best I can. So the first one was the procurement policy, and I think it was in December, as a council, we touched on the fact that we probably needed to, if there was time remaining, that we would try and maybe review some policies. And if there wasn't enough time, that we set the table for the next council to do so. And so since the beginning of this term for us, I think I've let it be known that the procurement policy was one that I felt was probably, if not the most important, then one of the most important policies that we have. And since the fall of 2017, Landon and I have had an ongoing conversation about this policy and about the wording of the policy and how it's set up. And if you remember 3 years ago, I brought a motion forward because I wanted to see the motion changed. I wanted it reworded, not necessarily changed, but reworded. And then when we did have that conversation in December, we had talked about going back and looking at the policies. And I went back and started to look at some of the policies that we have. And again, I concentrated not solely on the procurement policy, but it was one of the ones that I really wanted to delve into and come at it at a different angle. Because I think sometimes you get entrenched in the way that you look at things and the way you read things. And when I started to look at it this time, I tried to remove myself from my own bias towards it. And when I did that, I actually realized that the wording of the procurement policy is actually very good. And Landon's response to me that there's anything that we wanted to do, we could do within the framework of the policy is correct. And so I just wanted to let council know and the public know that for me, I'm not going to, I don't think there's a real need now to change that policy. And I think it's good sometimes when you come at things and are willing to say, you know, I've looked at it a different way. Because I have, in the procurement policy, there isn't anything that we can do or we can't do within the framework of this policy. And after having looked at it that way, that's my feeling right now. It may change, but as of now, that's sort of where I'm coming out at it. If any other council members have any opinions about that, that's just something I wanted to address.
Yeah, go ahead, Landon.
Yeah, so, and just on that, yeah, so specific to like the wording, yeah, I can understand that. Sometimes it's a little difficult to understand the nuances of it, and then when you take a look at it a little bit more deeply, then you can kind of wrap your head around it. But something, just so council is aware, the actual thresholds in the policy, we are allowed to increase. There was changes to the Procurement Act last year. So I agree with you, the wording and the structure and everything I think is fine, but we could potentially revisit this policy for the actual thresholds. They've, as you council is aware, for goods and services, there's allocated thresholds, and those have increased quite substantially. So we could take a look at that. And another thing, just kind of in general, and I agree with you, Paul, on all your stuff. We could just set the policies up like something that we want to do and we want to start implementing for 2021 is just to have the policies revisited, you know, every year, a couple of years, regardless. You know what I mean? Even if council determines, yeah, it works, it's cool, everything's fine, even just to go through that process. So I could probably, you know, we can connect off to the side, Paul, and I can give council an update on the thresholds. I don't have them in front of me right now, but I think they're, you know, around $104,000 or something like that was the information that I was given. So I'll put that information together and then put it out to council, and then whatever the determination is on how best to manage those policies and move forward from there.
Anyone else?
Just one final thought on that, and I think this is something that I realized as I was going through this policy as well as the others. When you're not on council at the time the policy is being written, you don't have firsthand knowledge as to the wisdom and the approach that they're coming and the angle that they're coming to at that time. So you miss out on that. But having revisited it, I could see that, you know, yeah, I could understand where they might anticipate this issue, and so worded it a certain way so that issue would be, you know, wouldn't be there. So anyway, just coming at it a different way, I guess, is helpful.
Yeah, okay, and I agree 100%. I'm a firm believer in the policies we have, and I am a believer that the policies have to be followed. But I'm also a firm believer that at least, at a very minimum, every 2 years, those policies should be revisited, gone over, and any changes that need to be changed, you know, be made. And I said this many times before, and I think every policy that we have should have a 2-year review limit on them, so we are up to date on them. Because even with the changes the government made, our policies now are behind a little bit, because we can bring those thresholds up, and we should. So, yeah, I agree, Paul, that it's a good policy, but it doesn't hurt to amend it every once in a while and review it at least every 2 years. Okay, next, Paul.
Okay, so the second one I'm going to talk about is the, I don't know if it's second on the list, but the second I'm going to talk about is the wharves. And I know most of the council members at some point have brought up the issue. And like I was thinking the other night, well, first of all, let me even tell you that there's a smaller issue within the larger issue. So the smaller issue was, last summer I received a call from a gentleman who said, take a drive down to the Jacket River Wharf with me. there's some cement blocks that are there that he felt was dangerous. He'd seen some younger people fishing on them and thought it was dangerous. Then I received a call from another gentleman last week talking about the rocks that were set up there. Now, I'm not that familiar with the wharf, so I've walked there a few times, but he was telling me too that he felt that those rocks were a safety issue for someone who liked to fish off the rocks, et cetera, et cetera. So that smaller issue that I'm going to leave with Landon and with the administration is there something we can do to maybe remove or place, those items someplace else so that they're not the safety issue that those people believe it is. Now, I know that there's a lot of factors down there, as there are with most wharves, right? There's a lot going on and property issues, et cetera, et cetera. But that's the smaller issue, and I'm just going to leave that with Landon. Perhaps he might get in touch with the gentleman who called and find some way to see if there's something that can be done. So that's the smaller issue. The larger issue is investment in the wharves. And, I take a look at Rorty's Point. When the investment was made in Rorty's Point, and there was a substantial investment made in Rorty's Point, Rorty's Point is beautiful, and it gets used, and tourists can go there. I mean, it's a great place, and I think the investment, the money that was put in there, was definitely worthwhile. I would like to see council, and it'll end up probably being the next council, and whoever's on there, take a look at seeing what investment can be made at these wharves, and what the issues are that's holding back any possible investment. And there are issues. Let's face it. I mean, Jacket River Wharf, from my understanding, talking to Landon and some of the other people in administration, there are some serious issues there. But I think what's lacking is maybe a collaborative effort to see if we can find some way, some method of investment that our wharves are given the investment that I think some of the people expect, and perhaps would work for us as well as Rorty's has. So I think what I'd like to see happen is I'd like to see a committee put together where you have council members and some people representing the wharf, both, and see if they can sit down and explain what the issues are, and perhaps they can add their expertise, and council can add expertise, and administration can certainly add expertise, because they would know all the variables there, and just see if there's any possible way that some sensible, workable investment could be made in both of those places so that we could get the best out of both of those places. So I just wanted to bring that up as a larger issue mixed in with the smaller one.
Okay, maybe, Paul, I'll just kind of, one of the problems with the wharf at the Jacket River Wharf is the fact that it belongs to Fisheries and Ocean. It doesn't belong to us. Unlike Rorty's Point, the property around Rorty's Point belongs to the village, so we could do things on that property because we own it. But we don't own the property at the Jacket River Wharf. There was, at one time, a committee put together under Fisheries and Oceans and to run that wharf and do some things, which they did for a while, and then they kind of just gave up and it never went anywhere. But your first stop would be Fisheries and Oceans. Anything that's going to be done there has to be done under their authority. The other problem is they were the ones that put those rocks and cement things there to keep the erosion from happening. So that was the reason for them being put there in the first place. So, but I would suggest maybe give a call to Fisheries and Oceans, get some information from them, and maybe we can go back to a committee like they did have before. That worked quite well when they had it, but then people just didn't want the responsibility of doing it, and they quit. So it's a good place to start, because it's got potential, that wharf has potential, but, you know, you need a committee to keep organizing it. Anyone else have any questions or comments?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I know for a fact that when Andy Flanagan was the Economic Development Officer, he was working on a significant project to develop the Durham Harbour, but then, of course, he was kind of unceremoniously dumped in the project. The project fell by the wayside. Fisheries and oceans are usually reluctant partners in almost anything positive and everything negative. But the reality is that we always talk about ourselves as a coastal community. We're shore from one end of the village to the other end of the village, but in a sense we're like Nassau, but we don't have a launching pad. And for us not to have any sort of a permanent structure, or we have temporary structures, but it's a big issue every year to develop them and then undevelop them in the fall. The fact that we don't have a launch pad for pleasure crafts, let's put it that way, because I don't think we could justify a wharf for fishing vessels, because we just don't have the fishing full population anymore. But the fact that we have no launch pad at all, except a temporary one that's certainly not attractive, and all dependent on what the tide level is when you want to go out or when you want to come in, that's a bit of an embarrassment to our community, especially since we boast about our coastline in practically all items of correspondence that we put out to promote our community. So I think your presentation is extremely timely. A little bit too late for this council perhaps, but I feel quite confident that we're a growing community again, and that would just be an added attraction that I think would ultimately pay for itself. I wouldn't suggest ever that we offer another service for free, because nobody does. But if you could launch your boat from someplace in Beldoon as opposed to have it parked at the wharf either down at Yawhall or at the marina in Dalhousie, this is a much better option. So I hope that your proposals gain some traction.
Oh,
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Paul, when I first came on council, it was, I advocated for some development of the wharves. And I know that the Culligan Wharf, that's where the temporary launch is. And I know that there's some issues with tides and currents and that sort of thing. But we're the only municipality, like Nick said, along the bay that doesn't have a wharf. And I would love to see something, and I know there, in the development that have been proposed, I know for the Durham Wharf, it was, more of a pedestrian and paddle boats and that sort of thing, whereas I think the Culligan Wharf or the Beldoon Wharf was more of a, bringing boats in and that sort of thing. But there's no reason why both can't, play off each other, and why we don't have someplace that you can go down and launch a boat or do a little fishing or grab a fish and chips, you know what I mean? Or an ice cream. It's there, the potential is there. And so maybe a committee could be launched to look at it and see what other people would like to see there and how we can go about doing that.
Yes, I've been a supporter too, like for the wharf and trying to get something done there and having, I brought it up several times during the last few years, and I even went to Caraquet last September and took pictures of what they have for a wharf, and they have several of them. Somebody had mentioned at one time a floating wharf, but with the rough seas and the rough waters in Beldoon, that would be a little hard to go, but There's a rock structure over here at the Culligan's Wharf already, if we could work off of that. And you're right, it would be an amazing thing to have in our village, to be able to launch a boat and, on any tide. So, yeah, that, I think the committee is a good idea, and with the election coming, I probably wouldn't mind being on that committee, on or off council, so.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Paul, you're
Okay,
next.
thanks, council, that's very constructive. This one's on the broadband, and my only goal with putting it on the agenda for tonight was to see if we could add some context to the discussion about whether or not this is, this is a good proposal for the village of Beldoon. Because right now, I'm not sure context is there. And it's very tough for people to make an educated judgment about something when they don't have all the information. And so, if I could compare it to something, I was trying to make a comparison in my head this afternoon, and I was thinking, if you ask somebody if they want better internet or faster internet, the answer is going to be automatically yes. Who doesn't want that? But it's like asking someone or telling someone, do you want better health care? And then not adding context that perhaps their coverage or their premiums or their insurance are going to rise. Yeah, I want it, but at what cost, or at what possible cost? So context is extremely important. And I'm not sure right now that context is there. And the only thing, I was thinking, what would really add some context to this is I don't think the cost of this project is in the public domain yet. I'm quite sure it's not. If it is, if the public can go someplace and find out what the cost of this project is, I'd like to know where to find it so I could let them know, because they don't know. And it's important to know that figure. And, I was asked, and rightfully so, by Councillor Divenborden in December, and you had every right to ask, if you're saying no to something, why? But I can't say why. I can't explain my vote if I can't, give the figures that are telling me why I want, why I think it's sensible to be prudent at this point. So my first question is, and I'll ask it, is the price tag on this in the public domain? If it isn't, can it be? And if not, why?
So, to your point, yeah, you're correct. I think that there's the context isn't there right now, because I think that's what they're trying to build, right? So what's happening right now is, council is very aware of this, but at any point, if the project is not going to move forward, council decides it's not going to move forward, then it's not moving forward. What's happening right now is the Rock Networks, the company that the municipality is working with right now, is trying to accumulate data to build a business case. They're trying to accumulate data to find out from the residents in the community if they would be interested. And again, you're absolutely right. Are you interested in high-speed internet? Yeah, of course I am. At what cost, right? So what they've done is they've kind of ballparked a couple figures that they would anticipate, the services costing, and then putting that out to the residents and saying, would you be interested in high-speed internet? And if so, would you be willing to pay, this amount? Or do you have service right now, and how much are you paying for that? And what is your speeds? And the intent is that they're going to put together a business case that's going to come back to council, so that council can review that prior to the application for funding being submitted. So to your point about if the overall project numbers, I don't know if they're out in the public domain. I think a lot of, well, the entire project is hinged on funding, right? I mean, a very, very significant part of the project is hinged on that. So I would think that that all kind of falls into it. When the data is accumulated and that's put back over to council, they'll have a business case. There's a very good chance that this company could come back to council and say, look, we've run the numbers and there's not a business case for this. You know, that there's not a point to move forward with this. That's very, very viable. So at this point, I think with the project really being in just the study phase, I'm not certain that the numbers have been put out there, but I can definitely look into it a little bit more.
Okay, thanks for that. The only problem with that is, the only issue with that is this: we're looking at possibly, we've talked about voting on this as a final vote in February. And I don't know how you have that vote without having the discussion. And I don't know how you have the discussion without having all the numbers.
I agree with Paul there too, because, you know, there's a lot more numbers than the public will actually see for what the packages are. It's what the village, what the government's going to give us, what the village needs to give out, and that is like, you know, you don't have all the information. Is all this information going to be given to the public before they do their survey? Because when you're thinking, we're talking a multi-million-dollar project, and then, you know, the federal government's only going to give you part of that. We got to make sure that we're going to come ahead and make money out of this, not that it's not, you know, you don't want to be the one saying, okay, well, this is going to be a failure because you don't have enough people. And I do realize that the public, if the public doesn't go for this, it's not going to go. It's a great project, but is the people going to be interested when you see all the numbers of the packages, the number of what it's going to cost the village, and down the road, of course, while there's no money going to be had during construction, or if the money will only be brought into the village after the project is done. So yeah, there's a lot of things out there that I think that the public needs to know before there's any decisions brought on this table.
Yeah, sorry, and just for a point of clarity, and I'll circle back just to verify this, but I don't believe that this project is going to go to vote in February. Whether or not that vote will be just to submit the application for the funding. That's all that council is going to. But yeah, Lillian, absolutely. There's cost numbers in there that are kind of, you know, I'll try to get some documentation over to council just to clarify a couple points.
Mr. Mayor, and it might not be a good comparison, but it comes to mind pretty quickly because there are a lot of uncertainties about this thing. But the way I approach the whole thing is like getting ready to be married. You begin by an engagement and you say, well, there's not a whole lot of risk involved in becoming engaged. And you can mitigate that risk right up till the time you get to the altar. So we're somewhere between that engagement and the altar. And it's never too late to back out until you get to that final step. And so the risk in taking that first step, I felt very comfortable with doing that. But you got a lot of things to sort out between then and the time that you say, I do, if you will, or I'll think about it.
Sorry, and something else I just want to add as well. Administration is going through quite a process right now with vetting a lot of background information. If it goes to the Capital Boring Board, you know, does it fall within the perimeters of what we're allowed to do? There's an awful lot of procurement. Are we, you know, is there restrictions on how we manage this? So there's quite a bit of information that I would expect is going to come out in the coming weeks. That's going to go along with your motion to apply for the funding.
And just one final thing for me, and just to hop on what Lannon just said. Administration has done a real good job in vetting so far. We received emails, I believe, last month, where some of the questions that needed to be asked and some of the information that needed to be received has already been asked for. that's a very positive thing when you see that, like, because that means that, you know, they know exactly what is at stake here. And so I really appreciated that, and I thought that was very good work. So, and the last point I'll make is I did send out a request. I did this in June, and I thought I would just do it because, again, just sort of when Councillor Divenborden asked me in December to sort of explain my vote, I said at the time that it was more of an instinctual thing for me, but that I would, you know, I'm going to base this vote on numbers and what I feel the data tells me. And I just asked a representative from Nova Communications if they would send me an Excel or some numerical based information that explained to me or made me understand better the impact that this proposal might have on some of the goals that we're trying to achieve by having it. Because let's face it, and let's remember, better internet and faster internet in today's world is a must. And I go back to that conversation that I heard on the radio in January where one of these tech experts at CBC had said, post-COVID, more adequate internet may be more important than it ever has been. And that's probably true. My issue with it is not whether or not this is necessary, because I feel that it is. It's just, does the risk equal the reward? And if I'm satisfied with that when it does come to the final vote, I'll put a yay. And if I'm not, and I'm hoping that this information that I get goes a long way towards answering some of those questions.
Okay, any other questions for Paul? Thank you, Paul. Okay, we'll move down to administration, CAO Lee.
Okay, just a brief update. We have been working on the arena proposal, but I just wanted to give council a quick update. The lease is probably going to be arranged so it's with individuals. It's not necessarily with a group. I sort of anticipated a group being on the lease. Discussed it with legal, discussed it with insurance. That's no issue at all. And however, the amount that we had sort of agreed to on a per month, we're going to up our insurance policy to allow for them to have the adequate insurance. It was our recommendation. It was the recommendation from our insurance broker that they do that. And then the group of people that are involved in this will compensate us for that insurance. So the numbers that we had sort of worked out, we're gonna increase it just a little bit just to cover that insurance policy. And I do expect I have an email out for a presentation. So if not this week, then we're gonna have a presentation from the group by next week. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Landon. That was it for you, yep. Okay, I guess that's it. Anyone else have anything else? If not, we need motion 0113. Mover and the seconder, please.
I move that the meeting is adjourned at 7:33.
Second by Tracy. Questions? On the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against, nay. Motion carried. Thank you.